Board. And I'm going to say good morning, everybody. And it says Phil Brilliant's recording. Yes, I am. Good morning and welcome to Continuing Professional Education Services Hot Topic. And, no hotter topic than when we bring Tony Russo on. So, I will definitely give an introduction to him in a second. Just a couple of ground rules I want to go over. I'm Phil Brilliant. I'm with Continuing Professional Education Services, as well as Brilliant Environmental Services. Along with me today is the chairman of the board of CPES, Dr. Jorge Berkowitz, and the executive director, Julia Masago, and all of you who have decided to join us this morning. We do this in a meeting format, so people have the opportunity to ask questions and raise their hands and do all those good things. I will ask, however, and I will do my best to make sure that I keep everybody muted. So if you can mute yourself, as far as your camera goes, that is completely up to you. If you'd like to be seen or not seen, but just that way we know that we can give our speaker the best opportunity to speak clearly and not be interrupted. And when it comes to questions, you can either put your questions it's funny, I say everybody mute themselves and everybody's unmuting themselves. But everybody will have the opportunity to ask questions. You can either raise your hand the virtual way, you can put the question into chat, and I'll try to keep us as organized as possible to get through this program. I'm going to do this real quick. That is the easiest way to do it. And Tony, you can unmute yourself. Good, thanks. Okay, so I think this is very timely. We're doing this as a hot topic to talk about several topics. We did this back in January as we rolled into 2025 and looked at what were going to be the environmental and the business issues for 2025. Yeah, we might only be 3 months in, but there's been a lot that's happened.
Sure.
I keep saying this is the year of whiplash. You just keep getting turned back and forth and everything. So I'm very happy to have with us Tony Russo, who I looked up. I had to do my homework, of course. I always have to remember. But this is your 12th year as president of CIANJ and publisher of Commerce Magazine. So it seems like yesterday that we were on the train ride. Is that really that long ago with
That long
John?
ago, Phil. Yeah, it was March was my 12th anniversary.
That's amazing. 12 years when you told me just to linger in the White House. And that's a story for another day,
I was
but I'm
going to say
glad
we have to tell everybody that story one day. So
yeah, one day. But Tony, I always think, aside from the fact that he represents, I'll let him give the introduction about how many businesses he represents across New Jersey. Tony is, a man of many hats and a man of many talents. I mean, he was a consultant working for an environmental consulting firm. He's worked for DEP. He has an education in mechanical engineering from NJIT. So he's not somebody who is kind of wandering the streets of, North Jersey and they picked him up and threw him into the president role. I mean, he really understands what we as business owners, as environmental consultants, as landscapers, as all the different businesses that he represents, he really knows what they do and understands it probably sometimes better than we do. And so with that, I'm very glad to have Tony with me today. And tell me a little bit about, you want to talk about CIANJ, and then we'll jump into our topics.
yeah, first of all, good morning, everybody. Phil, thank you. George and Jules, and we're very fortunate to have Phil Brilliant as one of our board members at CIANJ. So, but for those folks, because I took a look at the list, and I don't know everybody on the call, but just to give you some background on CIANJ, we actually started in 1927 as the Bergen County Chamber of Commerce. In 1983, we changed our name to what it is today. The magazine called Commerce Magazine, which is a B2B magazine, actually started in 1968. So, I'm proud of the fact that the board has given me the pleasure of serving as president the last few years. We represent about 900 companies. And what I love about my job is we're a general business group. Our mantra is all about a free enterprise, free market economy, private sector job growth. And out of the 900 members, you name the sector, we have a member in it, right? Small and large, whether it's hospitality, transportation. So I've really come to enjoy, and to your point, Phil, we could all read something online, we could all see something on TV, but really what I enjoy doing is actually talking to our members one-on-one the business owner, right? The businesswoman, the businessman who starts their company. Now, I can talk to a banker one day, a manufacturer the next, a developer, an insurance company. We have the hospital systems. Like I said, we have 16 colleges and universities that are members. So I really get down to street level, and I really want to hear from them directly on how everything is impacting them, whether it's the federal level, the state level. And it's been extraordinary. And to your point, when I did this back in January, here we are, May 1st tomorrow. There is a lot going on. And I think the reason for that is obviously we have a new president in the White House. And also this is an election year in New Jersey, not just for governor, but also for the assembly. So everybody's wondering, well, what's going to happen? How do I plan? Right? And what happens when there's uncertainty? Businesses usually take a step back. They usually hold on, let's just see what happens. And that's not a good thing all the time, which I could talk about. But again, it's a pleasure to be here again.
Yeah, and I think the old saying from the Hamilton play is being in the room, you learn something new. And you are definitely in the room in Trenton. You get the opportunity to meet with a lot of the legislators and to be able to take our issues to them, as well as them taking their issues to you. So why don't we start off? We talked about a couple topics, and I think the one that is broad ranging to a lot of industries is the A901 rules that came out. They've now closed the comment period. There's a lot of talk, a lot of hype, and I'll let you, give a little background on what A901 is and how we got here so that everybody understands that. And then where do you think we're going to be?
Yeah, I mean, good point. And I think when we did this in January, the rules had just been proposed.
Yes,
So
I think that day they came
I think you're right. Yeah, so here we are. Like Phil said, the comment period closed on April 21st. We submitted comments, but just to give folks a background, because I think it's important in what I'm about to say as far as what the legislative fix is going to be. So A901, people say, well, how did he even get the name A901 or the title? That was actually an Assembly Bill 901 that was done back in the 80s, I believe, with Senator Lesniak to go after organized crime in the solid waste sector, basically saying, wait a minute, if you're going to transport and dispose of solid waste in New Jersey, we want to make sure that you're reputable, that you don't have a background that would really jeopardize or just, basically send you in the wrong direction, if you will. So the A901 program has been very successful on the solid waste side. And that was more or less expanded to hazardous waste. But then Sandy hit in 2012. And unfortunately, during the reconstruction and the rebuilding, there were some examples where some contractors, developers had soil that was contaminated that showed up in residential places that it shouldn't have been. So the State Commission of Investigation launched an investigation, took a few years, and then they presented, and I'm going back to like 2017, 2018, before the legislature saying, we took a look at what happened here during Sandy, and they came out with a report that basically said, maybe we ought to apply the A901 licensing requirements to people that handle soil. So think about who handles soil, right? Landscapers, pool contractors, environmental consultants, developers, right? I mean, you name it. Even in your own residence, you dig up a hole, so
utility companies,
utility companies, right?
Yeah.
So fast forward in 2019, the legislature did sign or enacted, along with the governor, the dirty dirt law, as it's become known. And then everything got put on pause because of COVID. Fast forward, we were working with the department in the legislature. We got an extension because they wanted everybody to register, and then they wanted everybody to apply. And if you've never been through an A901 process, it's not an easy process. From the members that I've talked to that have gone through it on the solid and hazard side, they basically say, be prepared. It's a 2-year look back, right? It's a 2-year process to get the approval, but they look back as far as 10 years, and it's the state police, it's the attorney general. Do you have any bankruptcies? Did you violate any laws? And to me, it's very subjective when you read it in terms of that investigator. Any one, violation or bankruptcy or something that could be seen as could be jeopardizing your license, they could deny it. But the problem is it could take 2 years. So fast forward now.
And Tony, just to jump in real quick, and it's an individual license.
It's an individual license, right? It goes to the individual, not the company. So what happened is now the law was extended saying, okay, before you apply for the A901 on the soil side, let the DEP issue its rule. That took 2 years. So it came out in January, and unfortunately, the big issue, and there are a few, was the broker definition or the sales consultant definition. It basically is very broad, right? It basically says if you are involved in any kind of dealings with soil, then you would be deemed a broker or a consultant, and therefore you should be applying for a license. They exempted LSRPs. The law specifically said that, and the rules carried that out, but it wasn't clear to a lot of our members in meeting with the DEP a few times, depending on who you talk to, if you're an attorney, a consultant, you would be subject to the A901. So our concern was that it went beyond the original intent of the law, which was really to go after people that transport and dispose of the soil that's contaminated. So not to get into the weeds, but I think it's important. So what happened was, when the definitions came out in the rule, again, no changes were made, not really clear who would be subject to it. So that was the problem with the definitions. The other problem is, and we have landscapers as members, there is a de minimis level that was set at 15 cubic yards if you transport it and 100 cubic yards if you store it. From what they tell me, that's not a lot of dirt. It's not a lot of soil. So that's another problem. Oh, and then the department in the rule basically said, you as the entity can make a decision if you think you're going to be dealing with what's called unrestricted soil, right, which is not above residential standards, then you could certify each year that you never handled restricted soil. The problem with that, if you read the certification, it doesn't really get into what do you sample, how often do you sample, what kind of records do you store, what happens if an inspector comes in and challenges you on a project and says, disagrees with your assessment that it was unrestricted. It's just wrought with a lot of liability. So the rule came out. We had a great meeting with the Senator Bob Smith, who's chair of the Environment Committee. He was the sponsor of the bill. And I should mention, it wasn't just CIANJ, it was the Builders Association, the Utility Contractors Association, the NJUA, and a few others. And to the senator's credit, and this was during the comment period, we said, Senator, I think we have a problem on our hands. If this rule goes final as proposed, you're going to have thousands of applications going in. You're going to have companies that won't be able to operate. And it really goes beyond the intent that I think the legislature had in mind. And to his credit, he agreed. He's like, look, you have some legitimate concerns. What is the remedy here? And we said, look, we think there needs to be a legislative fix to this dirty dirt. Well, okay. And he told me at the time, if you can get the governor and the DEP commissioner on board with the legislative fix, we'll do it. Fast forward to just last week, right? The comment period ended. Just so out, we had Commissioner LaTourette as our keynote at our Environmental Innovations Award program on Earth Day. And he acknowledged publicly, we brought up the whole dirty dirt issue, and he acknowledged that he is open to hearing about how we can do a legislative fix. Because what we don't want to do, Phil, is we don't want it to go final, because look, let's be candid here, right?
We've seen that happen already.
We've seen that happen a lot. So is it 6 months, 7 months? Nobody really knows, right? Again, the department could take a month and finalize this. They could take 6 months. But I think the senator got it. And when we communicated with the commissioner, do we really want to take that chance to let it happen and roll as opposed to codifying it in law? And when we think we have enough momentum now, and now it's a question of, and we sent in a letter to the senator, we sent in our comments, basically giving them language, basically saying at the end of the day, you want that material not to show up in bad spots, right? And that's, well, how do you do that? Well, you hire a licensed transporter or disposal company. And by the way, when it comes to soil, you need to raise that de minimis level to 200 cubic yards across the board. Go after the big piles, and then, whether or not we're successful in terms of, the legislation, I think we've done our job. We put it in, the ball's in the senator's court. It's in the DEP's court now. but be rest assured, if it goes final as proposed, then I think we have a lot of problems ahead of us, and there's going to be a lot of ambiguity. And I should mention too, just to give you an idea of why this is a problem. So they expanded the definition of what's called a key employee, right? In prior, you didn't look at extended family. You would look at a spouse, you would look at children that were in the business. But now the rule basically says that, oh, by the way, we also, and you need to account for first cousins. So, and I'll be candid, I'm Italian American. I have 26 first cousins on my mother's side. So that means just think about having the wherewithal to do something like that. It's just, it creates a nightmare. And I think the department doesn't have the resources to do it. So am I optimistic about a legislative fix? Yes. The question is, we have to get it done in the next 2 months, because the summer they take off. And then because it's an election year, they probably won't come back until after Thanksgiving, what's called lame duck. And by then the rules could go final, and that's the unknown here.
Yeah, I mean, and so two things. One is, I remember I was getting my solid waste A901, and I was going through my divorce, and they interviewed my soon-to-be ex-spouse. I'm still shocked to this day I got it, but it did cost me though. But with that said, I mean, you kind of touched on at the end, we said tomorrow's May 1st. Okay. We are 39 days out or something like that from the primary election. We're, what are we, 6 months from the general election. We have a lame duck commissioner, though he would like to remain as commissioner. The entire legislator is up, legislator, the assembly is up for election. How does this fix really happen before the department finalizes the rules? I mean, it's a perfect storm, but it's also, I mean, you're a lot more optimistic than I am. I think I made a comment to you that, when he said to you, you get the governor on board and the commissioner on board and we'll do the legislative fix. You did it. So is this practical? This could really happen this year. And I know you don't have a crystal ball.
Yeah, no, but that's a fair point, right? But the reason why because I think the senator, to his credit, called me up one day and said, look, Tony, I'm having dinner with the commissioner. Give me your top 2 issues with dirty dirt, right? And I sent them the letter again and circled it. And I said, look, and then the commissioner acknowledged the dinner and said at our event, yeah, let's talk about a fix. I think, Phil, the reason why I'm optimistic is the Administrative Procedures Act. And again, I'm not an attorney, but now that the comment period is closed, anybody could do whatever anybody wants to do, including the legislature. They could step in here, even though now the comments are in, the rule is still draft. They could step in, pass legislation, amend the statute, fix the problem, and then they could rescind the rule. And to me, it's a win, because they don't have the resources to do it, to process these applications. And so I think it's in their interest, and who would be on the other side of it? It's not like this is a controversial groundwater standard or, air standard. This is literally a administrative rule that's going to cost companies a lot of money with no benefit, no gain. And the analogy that we used with the chairman was pretty straightforward. If you have a plumbing issue in your house, you hire a licensed plumber. I make that phone call to that plumber. I don't need to get a plumbing license, right? But now the rule, the way it reads, is simply by me being involved with plumbing, I would need to get a license, right? So it seems silly.
Makes no sense.
Makes no sense. And I think they realized that maybe they went a little too far. And so am I optimistic? The only thing that I am concerned with is, with everything else going on with the state budget, the primaries, the elections, my window, or our window, is really May and June, because I'm concerned that if we wait till lame duck, maybe the DEP, when they're closing out this administration, maybe they want to get things done, right? And so, if we're successful, I'll know in a week or two. I have a call into the senator, and hopefully we get a bill drafted, and then it's just a question of getting it through before.
And then, of course, also, I mean, we have, Jeanine McGregor, who was kind of the head of the bureau that is now retired. So she's now left DEP. Not sure who's moving into that spot. We've seen Tom Farrell kind of be the liaison or the person who's been the outward spokesperson, but it all falls under Mike Hastry at the end of the day. So how does all this play out? Because if you remember, he was ready to do enforcement under the Q&A that was back in 2020. So
Big Bill, at this point, you deal directly with the commissioner
yeah,
and
oh yeah,
his chief of staff and let them work on the response to comments, and nothing changes, but you pivot to the legislature, and the only hope here is that, we get a bill drafted. I'll feel better if by the next week or 2 weeks, we actually get a bill drafted, right? And the process starts, because then, maybe the department can be, just sit on this for a while. So if we're not successful in getting it done by July 1st, then, we'll get it done in the fall if they come back before the election or, during lame duck. The problem with politics, the problem with Trenton is, and people told me this a long time ago, if you're a type A personality, you like to do it yourself, you want to get things done, right? Here, you got to get, out of the
yep,
121 people, including the governor, you got to get 63 people to buy in on it. And it's not easy given everything else that's going on in the world. So
yeah,
that's why it's just something we got to stay focused on. And, we're going to need all the business groups and everybody on this call to say this is a big deal for yourselves, for your clients, for your businesses. You don't want to be spending the money. You don't want to go for this license unless you really want to. And by the way, and let me be clear, at the end of the day, on the soil side, should there be an A901? Yes, it should be, if we're successful, 200 cubic yards or more that's above residential standard, right? And then you go for it if you transport or, if you dispose of it. And when I say
right. And the other thing,
it could be use it too.
right. And the other thing too, just to clarify is, I mean, has the registration period even closed? So if
Yeah,
you now have rules and you want to isn't the registration period already closed back in 2022?
yeah.
So it's a crazy scenario. A question came in, and off the top of my head, I can't remember. Is beneficial reuse covered by the proposed law? I think it is, right?
Yeah, in terms of whether or not it's not exempt. It's not
No, it's
exempt.
not.
It's
So
not.
you would, yeah, you still, basically would need to have the license to be able to handle
I should
those
say,
materials.
yeah, that the Utilities Association and some of our utility members are trying to work out a bud, but I'm hearing that it might not be a solution. But yeah, so there's no exemptions for that.
Yeah. And, give a little plug. If you're not a member of CIANJ yet, you should be, because that's a great opportunity. You're going to get the information. I mean, I get a newsletter every morning of things that happened yesterday. So you will know immediately what has happened when it comes to A901, if anything happens. So
Yeah,
little
thank you,
plug
Phil.
out there. Yeah, no problem. No problem. We work together here. It's good. But with that kind of rolls into, so again, this has been, and I can't remember the last time with the governor leaving and potentially commissioner leaving that we've had so many rule proposals come out in the first part of that calendar year, whether it be a proposal or final rule. But we did have the groundwater quality standards go final in January or February 5th or something like that.
It was
February 3rd,
January.
sorry,
Yeah, it
February
was
3rd.
January. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So they go final. Basically we have some new standards for our emerging contaminants. Things are now in the groundwater quality standards. And I guess, what have you heard relative to feedback in general? And then we'll talk about the phase-in period of it.
Yeah, so the rule was adopted, I believe, because I looked this up for today, in January of this year. And
Okay.
64 out of 73 compounds changed, right? So now we're in implementation. So at this point, Phil, I have not heard what the impact was. That's more or less probably people on this call when you start applying it to projects and how disruptive it can be. I'm sure we're in a holding pattern right now on what the impacts are, but they're going to be significant, because when you have that many changes to standard, it's probably going to impact a lot of projects out there. So I guess the best answer for that is it's yet to be seen, what
Yeah,
kind
the
of
key,
impact we're going to have.
right, the key component, however, that they put into those rules is that upon adoption of the groundwater quality standards, the remediation standards are updated, are
Right.
changed. And so there's a phase-in period right now, which I think expires August 3rd. I have to go back and look. And that phase-in period basically means if you have a site that you are remediating and the standard is changing. Okay. If it's an order of magnitude, excuse the phrase, you're screwed. Vinyl chloride, order of magnitude, you now have to comply with that new standard. So the past 25 years of remediation, you need to go back and start looking to see where you are on vinyl chloride. Okay. But other like benzene changed. Ethyl benzene changed. I believe PCE, TCE. If you want to preserve that standard, you have to either have a remedial action work plan approved by the department or certified by the LSRP or remedial action report before August 3rd. And so I know in my office, we are evaluating every site because looking at downward trends, looking at all these things, all of a sudden the standard changed. And last thing to say is when groundwater standards change, soil standards change, and we haven't even seen the migration to groundwater pathway numbers yet, that in a recent call I had with David Hames, they're still working on.
Yeah, I mean, that's good to know about the August deadline because, and I keep hearing this all the time, Phil, I'm sure you have too, but it seems like the goal post keeps moving, right? And these sites don't get closed out. And that's been the criticism, if you will, in New Jersey on how we clean up sites. And you know, in terms of what's going to happen, I'm sure once we start to hear some issues and maybe some projects being delayed or not going through because of this, then, you know, what is the action that you take, right? And that's a more difficult issue to tackle because now you're getting into, and again, dealing with the legislature. And again, they deal with so many different issues that are they going to understand or have the time to get into the technicality of a groundwater standard? No. So it's up to us to educate them and say, this is the problem. This is a possible solution, right? And so, you know, again, not to get into the weeds, but whether that's, you know, and I hate the terms risk-based, you know, corrective action, but, you know, I'm hearing all the time that people are sampling their sites. You have asphalt on top, it's natural attenuation. It's 20 years later and you get a blip and, you know, above a standard and yet you can't close it out. And that's a problem. That's a problem. And I think that's a problem that we have to take back up to the rooftop and say to whoever comes in as governor, wherever the legislature is, but we have to, as an industry, give them a simple ask. You know, what is it that would help you get to where you want to be in the meat and industry, but yet still be protective of the environment and protective of public health. And so, look, another program, and forgive me, Phil, but I just think it's timely. But on June 18th at the APA Hotel, we're putting together a half-day program on the revitalization of vacant properties, where we're going to talk about this very issue. We got developers, brokers, we got LSRPs, and I'm happy to say we also have the DEP and Senator Smith on the panel. Very fluid. You can go to our website, but these are the kind of conversations what we want to start in June to say what are possible remedies, right? Forgive that word, to fix this problem where we're always in this constant state of cleaning up a site when there's really no risk. And I know that word can mean a lot of things to a lot of people, but we got to put it into context where, again, there is no debate about being protective and also not going to harm the economy. Because I guess, and this is what I've been told, you compare us to Pennsylvania or California, you can get a similar site cleaned up and closed out and developed with no continuing monitoring. Maybe I might be wrong, but a lot faster than you would in New Jersey.
Yeah, I mean, and you make me think of the two phrases that I unfortunately hear so much in New Jersey and I don't necessarily like. One is the unintended consequences when they put through a regulation and we have to comply with the unintended consequences of it, or chilling effect on development. And you kind of touched upon it right there, and we'll kind of switch into that next subject. And I think that getting developers together, DEP, and everybody to talk about this in June. I mean, the ARCS rules. I call them the ARCS rules, but the SARA 2.0 rules that took the department 6 years to get out for some odd reason, had one of those chilling effects on development. that basically has the potential to change how due diligence is done in New Jersey. Um, and whereas anybody with knowledge has an obligation to report if a discharge has occurred. And that's what we saw in the draft. In the proposal, we saw a lot of comments go back. This was something that we heard in closed door sessions when we were talking about putting rules together back before COVID. Mark Peterson was in the room, and he said, I'll deal with it in rules. Mark Peterson is long gone. What we saw in rules is the chilling effect and the unintended consequences. What are you hearing about this one?
Good question. Because you hit it right on the head. The big one is who now needs to call the hotline when there's contamination, and it's a game changer, right? Because that's
Yep.
going to have a chilling effect. I know everybody wrote their comments in, and now it's up to the department to go through them and finalize them. This is another one, Phil, where we have to stay vigilant and keep our communications with the department ongoing. Because if this is one that's not going in the right direction and they finalize it, and then you have a change of administration, I think we take it up with the next administration, Democrat, Republican, and say why we need to fix it. So the hope is that our comments are successful. I think Chairman Smith, again, Senator Smith, he understood it. And I think he weighed in with the department too, saying that really wasn't the point of, Site Remediation Reform Act. And that, leave it up to the responsible party, the LSRP, but just don't have anybody that comes across contamination now calling it in, because then you would have a lot more calls into the hotline. So I wish I had a better answer for you, Phil, but this is another one where we have to be optimistic that the department's going to fix it in the final rule whenever that happens, but we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, and again, the comments on that I think were end of February, beginning of March. So I'm quite certain they're already working on those. They're
Yeah.
going through. I know I had David Hames as part of another program out of Rutgers, and he wasn't able to discuss it, because the rules are still out there, the proposal, but he didn't say anything that basically said they were looking at any other options at this point in time. So, that is an interesting one because that has a affect developers, municipalities, LSRPs, everybody who touches any type of remediation, redevelopment in New Jersey. It kind of changes the game a little. Not that we shouldn't be proactive in cleaning up contaminated sites. But if you start forcing the hand of property owners, the leverage, the financial aspect, all of those, relative to redevelopment is squashed, and negotiations go out the window.
No, I agree. And it's one of these things where, this administration, right? Here's what we do know, that at the end of December into January, we're going to have a new governor, potentially a new administration. Whether or not the commissioner stays on board, that's to be determined, right? Whoever comes in. But they have all these legacy issues that, depending on their priorities, are they going to want to finalize them before they leave? Are they going to pass it off to the next governor and the next administration? These are all that's why best word to describe it is so fluid that we just have to stay on top of it. And any piece of information that anybody gets would be valuable, because again, it's an ongoing process.
So I'm going to pivot into a different topic, but it ties into DEP, and we know that you know, we as practitioners have dealt with a lot of new people over the past 4 to 5 years. We saw a lot of institutional knowledge leave DEP. I mentioned Janine McGregor just retired. I think we're going to see some more this year. But we also hear, and this happened either I think in December or January, that we really have a hiring freeze right now in New Jersey. We have a budget that'll be the largest budget in history, that's really full of a lot of incentive type programs. I'll be generous on what I say. How does initiatives of this current administration play into what you're hearing as to what we're going to see in this budget going forward? And I know
Yeah.
we are only 60 days away from June 30th.
So, and I think it's important to give everybody some context. So in February, the governor proposes a budget he proposed a $58 billion budget. He puts out what's called a budget in brief document. You kind of go through it. And when I went through it, I was surprised to see that the DEP, actually their budget from last year actually went down. And this is in terms of state dollars. So park that for a second, because that was interesting. But what further complicates matters, and by the way, after the governor proposes it in February, the legislature takes the next 2 or 3 months, was March, April, even into May, and they hear from all the commissioners, and our commissioner, DEP commissioner, testified yesterday before the Senate Budget Committee, I think 2 weeks ago before the Assembly, and they hear from the public. I testified on it, and then they basically use June to finalize the budget. So it's important that the Assembly and the Senate finalize that spending plan. They could add to it 58 billion, they could take away from it. What was really a monkey wrench here was the fact that now you have President Trump coming in and clawing back a lot of federal dollars. And I got to tell you, I've never seen it in my years where a lot of people are so nervous, whether it's colleges and universities, nonprofits, all these grant programs. But where is the money going to be there? And if the money's not going to be there, is the state going to kick in the money? I think legislators have a tougher time this year because I think the pressure is really going to be on whatever final budget they come up with is, where is that money going to go? For example, the commissioner testified that I think 10% of the employees at DEP are federally funded positions. So if the feds pull back that money, is the state going to kick it in? It's to be determined, right? It's, again, very fluid, right? Is Donald Trump's administration going to put it back? Are they going to pull back? Are they going to, who knows, right? It's all to be determined. But to your point, Phil, and that's why I think people should be, again, vigilant come June on the details of the final budget. And I hope they don't do, and when I say they, meaning the legislature, what they've done the last 2 or 3 years where they don't give the public ample time to respond, right? Because usually, and I know it's a complicated budget, but what used to happen is, maybe the third week in June, they present a bill. It's usually pretty voluminous. And they say, here's the spending plan, here's all the programs. And then people have an opportunity to weigh in and say, we're for it, we're against it, here's why. At the end of the day, they're the elected officials. They vote by July 1st, and the budget's finalized. I'm not sure. I mean, the last 2 or 3 years, I think they did it a week before, a couple of days before. And so that makes it tougher to actually analyze it and weigh back in on it. I think, again, I think the money is going to be the issue, and I think a lot of programs probably will be impacted. It's just a question on where the governor and the commissioner, where their priorities are. And I could tell you energy is important to them, climate change. We could talk about the real rule, which is that resilient environment landscapes, the PACT rule, right, protecting against climate threat. All these rules that are going to be going out and going final. We'll see if the department puts a lot of priorities, hence money, into those, and whether the legislature agrees or not.
So I'm going to pivot a little bit. I want to go back to the budget, but you just brought up the real, okay? And you talk about chilling effects on development. If anybody's had the opportunity, or if you haven't had the opportunity, read the executive summary on it. I mean, I live at the Jersey Shore. We've gone through Hurricane Sandy. We've gone through redevelopment, and many structures in the waterfront areas are not going to meet the criteria set forth in the real. And if you're going to try to do additional development, it's almost non-existent on how it does it. And so I guess, the question there is, I don't know if that's something you're going to address in June at your seminar, but that's, another factual situation that I think brings you conflict between business and regulators.
Good. And I should say, and if people want to watch it, you can go to the New Jersey Legislature's homepage, go to the archive proceedings and look at the Senate and Assembly budget for the DEP. A lot of the legislators, both Democrats and Republicans, asked the commission about the impact of the real rules. And I have to defer to my colleagues at BIA, the builders, because they took a lead on it. It was a 1,000-page rule. But there seems to be a debate. Even Senator O'Scanlan yesterday said to the commissioner, look, you have your views that disagree with their views. They have their views. Why don't we get on a call? Because the comment period closed last year. So now that's done. Another one. Is the department going to finalize? And let's get on a call and figure out where we are, right, with flood hazards and affordable housing. And I think it's such an important rule, Phil. And what struck me is that this was bipartisan, right? The concern is to say, where is this all going to happen? What's going to come down? And I think that's another one where we have to stay vigilant on it, because it will have a big impact on development in New Jersey.
Right, and as much as and it basically, just for those people who don't know, it has to do with coastal development, has to do with
Floods.
waterway, flood zones, and it's not just, take out, yes, Monmouth, Ocean, Atlantic, Cape May counties, but Jersey City, Hoboken. I mean, it is more of New Jersey than you can imagine is impacted by this rule if it's approved as written. Tony, Rohan asked the question. Do you know off the top of your head what percent of the current budget is DEP's percentage?
Oh, it's small. I mean, it's, I think, I have to go back and look, so don't quote me, but I want to say last year about 400 million was direct aid from the state, or 500 million. I think it's somewhere, they cut it by like 100 million. And again, it's proposed. But so it's small when you consider a $58 billion budget.
Yeah. So 58 billion, 400, if anybody wants to do the math
500
real
million.
quick.
Yeah, it's not a lot. People think the DEP is a big budget. No, you got to look at Department of Human Health. You got to look at, some of the bigger ones that really take up a lot of the money. Department of Health. So yeah, it's not a big percentage when it comes down to it. But again, the complexities of the department is you get a lot of federally funded positions, right?
Yeah.
You get direct state funded positions. And the commissioner made a valid point, right? And we talked about it last week. What are the options if the president pulls back federal dollars, right? And I'm thinking Title V permits, and I'm thinking of wetlands and the gypsies, and what are the two options here? You either kick in state money, or you're going to have increase in fees, right? So it would be an impact to our members. So, this is real time. It's happening right now. Nobody really knows for sure how this is going to play out, and that's why, we should have another program in July to say what happened, right?
We're definitely going to have what happened, programmed. And again, and Rohan makes a comment that the department gets fines and penalties and stuff like that. It depends. Some areas, those penalties go to the general treasury. It's not always to DEP. Fees for oversight, stuff like that do, but even just, general statement. I mean, the UST program gets federal grants. So, how that all plays out also, money wise. But you touch upon it, and so I'm going to put you on the spot, the Trump effect. And I mean, this is something 100 days was yesterday, most successful 100 days in the history of the United States. I heard somebody say that yesterday, but I mean, now you have New Jersey filing, I think, their second lawsuit against the federal government. Are they going to make cuts? I don't see how they're not going to make cuts in New Jersey if New Jersey keeps fighting back against them. It's just what happens in this current administration. Practicality wise, how does that play into the homeowners in New Jersey, the business owners of New Jersey, the operator? I mean, there's so many different areas this could impact.
Yeah, good question. I know I've talked to a lot of our members. I'll start with the tariffs, right? We weren't big fans of the tariffs because we saw the immediate impact, right, with the markets, but also it creates that uncertainty. People pull back. Again, good intended, right? Let's level a playing field with tariffs, taxes, but you got to look at what the impacts are. We had one member, just anecdotally, but it's important, that said to me, Tony, I invested $7 million in bridal gowns that were made in China. They're stuck at the port. Who knows with these tariffs? If we double those tariffs, it's going to be, 14 million, and I would go out of business. Real stories, right? American dollars invested in overseas, whatever country it is. So tariffs had an impact, but also you start to see the impacts of Doge with the clawbacks of all this money, right? And EPA is important, right? And maybe we'll put in a plug for next Wednesday with the EPA regional administrator. But to me, there is an impact. It's yet to be determined which pockets of money are being pulled back, why. But don't be surprised if some of that money returns, right? And that's where we have to be optimistic, and that dependent on the politics, dependent on the negotiations, dependent on the program, the sensitivities. Don't be surprised if the feds kick money back in. It could go into transportation too, when you think about it, right? It's not just environmental, it's transportation, it's research and development, it's higher ed money. So here's what I can say. It's definitely been disruptive, right? And that's not a question, right? It's just a question now of, you know, when you say the Trump effect, you know, obviously he wants to roll back regulations. We think we're overly regulated. You know, I can't begin to tell you, Phil, how many members tell me, Tony, I sample and I report for year after year after year. There's an administrative and a cost burden to it, but what's the end result? What am I doing here? You know, I put in state-of-the-art technologies, and, you know, so I think that's a fair point to raise, to say, what are we doing? Should we go? Can we do it better? So to answer your question, Phil, I think it's definitely, it's been unsettling. And what happens, I mentioned this at the top of the program, and unfortunately, when businesses sense uncertainty, they hold their money. They maybe don't take out a bank loan. Maybe they don't buy that new piece of equipment. Maybe they don't hire that employee because they want to see what happens. And you can't blame them, because that's the right business move, just to see where the economy is going. So, but I'm optimistic because it seems like it's turning around and starting to loosen up.
Yeah, I mean, in 32 years of owning a business, I have never seen as many clients go from 30 days to 60 days on
Yeah.
payments overnight. Okay. I mean, we have seen it immediately over. Yeah, the cash flow, the cash crunch. Usually I see it around April 15th. We started seeing it around January 15th. It is definitely the,
yeah.
yep,
People
yep,
like
the
Tony, I'd love to
unknown.
attend, love to sponsor, but we're going to wait on this one. So,
Yep. Yeah. So that rolls me into, we got a few minutes left. Anybody have questions, you know, raise your hands or put it out there. But, you know, so we touched upon it. So we have the entire assembly up for election, and we have, I think, this governor's race. You know, I don't see much about it in the news, in my mailbox, or anywhere. We talked about this back in January. Um, you know, where do you think we are today as far as the Democrat and the Republican who are going to stand strong at the end of the day and be in
yeah,
November?
and before I get into that, Phil, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about PFAS real quick.
Oh yeah, go.
I didn't touch on PFAS, but PFAS to me is one of those issues, because when collectively there are 13,000 PFAS chemicals, what we're starting to see a lot of monitoring, a lot of sampling. We have things coming out of EPA, things coming out of DEP, not so much out of the legislature anymore, because it's a wait and see. But let's stay vigilant and focused on that. I know you and I did a program, and George,
Yep.
a couple of years ago on PFAS. It's probably time to kind of bring everybody back together and say, this is where we are with PFAS, but what is the right direction to take as industry, protecting the environment? And that's worth having an event on. So, but let's get to the gubernatorial elections. When in January, we had 6 Democrats, 4 Republicans. The one Republican who dropped out was former Senator Ed Durr, the truck driver who defeated Steve Sweeney. He dropped out. So now we have, on the Republican side, you have Jack Ciattarelli, who ran again and almost won. You have Bill Spadia, the radio show host, and you have Senator John Bramnick, who's a personal injury attorney. The 3 are still in the race.
You do have, and you do have the Inglewood Cliffs mayor. Yeah. I can't remember.
Yeah, I liked it. Yeah, I guess he's there, but I don't think
he's there.
I don't think he publicly matched any funds. And I don't think he's really.
He won't be on the stage. He won't be on the stage.
So that's why I think it's effectively 3.
Okay. Yeah.
I think you have to give the edge to Jack Ciattarelli. I think, and if you remember what I said in January, I think give it a couple of months, give it 3 months, and you're going to start to see people pulling away from the pack. By all accounts, people that I've talked to, things that I've read, looks like Jack is starting to pull away. But again, I want to qualify this. In politics, anything can happen. A month and a half is an eternity. You know, again, but on the Republican side, it's starting to come into clear picture. The picture is getting clearer. On the Democrat side is absolutely fascinating, because out of the 6 of them, right, you have Mayor Steve Fulop out of Jersey City, Mayor Baraka out of Newark. You have former Mayor Sean Spiller, also NGA President Sean Spiller, former President of the Senate Steve Sweeney, 2 Congress representatives, Mikey Sherrill and Josh Gottheimer, and then you have I'm forgetting somebody. Oh, I think I covered the 6.
I think you got the 6. I counted.
Yep. None of them have dropped out of the race. The only one that didn't raise enough money to publicly match funds was Sean Spiller. I don't even think he qualified for the next debate, but he's still in there. And so I think it's going to be a 6-way race, which is going to be phenomenal, right? Because you know, and I looked at the numbers, right? New Jersey has 2.4 million registered Democrats to the Republicans 1.6. And when you look at the history of primary turnout, you're looking at less than 30%, right? 20% of the people. So do the math. Not a lot. So if you have 6 people taking a piece of that pie, you're looking at a potential winner could be 25%, 30%, which will be extraordinary. So unless something really happens in the next month and a half, I think it's a toss-up on the Democrat side, because again, it all depends on, do they coalesce around one or two, what their platforms are. I can tell you, Phil, that because I've looked, they all have money in the bank. A lot of them, with the exception of Spiller, publicly matched funds, and that's important because that could be $2 for every dollar. And looking at their campaign accounts, you know, not that money is everything, but money is important. Millions of dollars are still in there. What you're going to see, in my estimation, is right around Memorial Day, you're going to start seeing a lot more commercials, money being spent, street money, because June 10th is not that far away.
Yeah, I'm already starting to see a lot of lawn signs, and I hate lawn signs. Um, I really just don't like seeing them littered all over the place. But it was interesting because you're seeing a lot of the environmental groups align themselves with Mikey Sherrill. You're seeing a lot of the business groups with Gottheimer and Sweeney.
Yeah.
And so it's what's a stronger advocacy here in New Jersey is going to see how that all plays out. But they are all across the state. And you really, it is pretty amazing that the 6 of them, and I think, Spiller still is a wild card because he's got the NJEA behind him and how that all plays out. But it's,
Super
yeah,
PAC,
I mean, yeah, and they're all, as far as the debates go, and there's 2 debates for each in the month of May. I can't remember the dates off the top of my head, but if you remember last time, the Democratic debate looked like it was a kumbaya, a nice forum, everybody answered, and people at the Republican debate were not only fighting on stage, but they were fighting in the crowd. I think I shared that with you,
yeah.
and but what happens, because this is the last hurrah. And to my surprise, and I went back and looked at this, more people watched those debates than had ever happened in debates in New Jersey on that early in an election.
Yeah,
So,
and I should have said that Mikey Sherrill has the edge if you talk to people, but it's a small one. But to your point, Phil, I still think, and based on history, that the voter turnout on both the Republican side, you're looking at 300,000 to 400,000 on both sides, right? So do the math, right? I mean,
yep.
it's gonna be tough, and so I think it's gonna come down to the wire, and unless something happens between now and June 10th. But why it's important, because all eyes are on New Jersey and Virginia. What's the Trump effect going to be in the general election? So why does that matter? Because whoever the governor is going to be, he or she, will definitely have an impact on what we talk about and what we do. The legislature, let's not forget, the assembly is up, right?
I was going to say, yep.
I want to say the Democrats have like a 13-seat edge. I could be wrong. I could be off 1 or 2, but it's going to be interesting because in 2021, when there was a wave, the red wave down South Jersey, the Republicans picked up 6 or 7 seats, right? So is that going to happen again? It's to be determined. Here's what I can tell you is if the economy is rolling and doing well and people are happy, you got to give the edge to whoever the Republican is. But we're a blue state, and it comes back to look at the registered voters. The Democrats, almost by 1 million, have the edge, but the 2.5 million unaffiliated voters. Here's another stat for you, which is phenomenal to me. I'm a political junkie, but when the
Same here,
governor races only bring out 40%. So that means 6 people stay home. It's not a presidential, right? It's not, it's like 40%. And I think I mentioned this in January, but the turnout last November was in the low 60s, lower than 2020. And in 2020 was close to 80, right? So what happens in a governor's race? It's just, I hate to say it, not on people's mind like it is a presidential. So, out of 45% of the electorate, the registered voters, again, do the math. That's why elections matter. That's why get out there, no matter if you're a Democrat, Republican, make your position heard. I tell our members, look at it through the business lens, evaluate each one and say, what are they going to do for you as a business, right? And then vote your conscience, right? And then you have to do it that way. So,
And we're already seeing, so this is the first year you're gonna have no lines on your ballots.
Gonna bring
And
that.
we're,
as well.
yep, so the people in Ocean County, and we have, the second largest senior population in the country next to Dade County, Florida, have been completely confused by the mail-in ballots they're receiving. The questions I'm hearing to the county clerk's office
Yeah.
on where's this person, where's that person, I usually go down the Republican list. I can't, so there is going to be a lot of confusion when people get into the ballot box or get into the booth and and don't see things the way they used to be.
Yeah, I think it's important to give some context to what you just said, because I was going to bring it up. The game changer in all of this is the way the ballot is designed. And that stems from the lawsuit that Senator Kim, now then at candidate Kim, brought against the county line, right? Everybody's got county
Yep.
bosses, Republicans, Democrats. To your point, Phil, if you go on to the Division of Elections website, there is a guide. Take a look at the sample ballot, because to me, it's extraordinary. It's to your point, all the governors are going to be listed, and it's a raffle
Yep.
on who gets the top. So you won't be able to distinguish if you're a Democrat, Republican. You can put a party slogan down, right? Americans for green energy, whatever. But that to me is a game changer, because to your point, people used to vote, whether you're a Republican, you maybe vote Republican all the way down, Democrat all the way down. The way it's going to work now is all the governor candidates are going to be lumped together with no distinction whether they're Democrat, Republican, right? And that's for the general. On the primary, the same thing. They're going to be, you're not going to know who and who's on the assembly. So everybody's lumped in together. And I think they decide that by raffle and who gets the top spot. I think it's going to be more of an impact in the general election when the unaffiliated voters vote than in the primaries, for sure.
Yeah, but it's definitely just a quick example, just to let you know. So in Ocean County, several organizations have incorporated America First. And they're using that as their slogan to tie, because that ties people in their mind to Trump and on the Republican side. So it's brilliant that people are doing it. And the people who think that they're aligned to Trump that aren't able to use it are trying to sue everybody. It is fascinating political wise. So I have 10:28. Anybody have any questions? I want to be cognizant of everybody's time. Dr. Berkowitz gently raised his hand. You have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, just good stuff, Tony. Really good stuff. I want people not to be terribly concerned about the budget cuts. However, 10% doesn't sound like a lot when you say 10% of funding is going to dry up because of federal grants. No, that's a department-wide average. Take a look at individual components in that figure. Air toxics, Superfund sites. Let's not forget that 50% of our Superfund sites are EPA leads. What's going to happen to those? Many of them are in progress. And that's 50% of our near 100 sites. So what I'm saying to you is that they're going to be disproportionate impacts, absolutely. And that 10% may sound meaningless, but it's not when you take a look at program by program. Great stuff, Tony. Thank you so much.
One other thing I forgot, Phil, but it's important if people on the call, I know we have a lot of non-CIANJ members, but on next Wednesday, May 7th, I'll be on stage with the EPA Regional Administrator, Mike Martucci, and I've worked with his team on a bunch of questions, including the federal dollars and what's going on with Superfund and things like that. So if you want to sign up, that's next Wednesday. It's a lunch at the APA Hotel in Woodbridge.
Mm-hmm.
And I put into chat, I put in the CPES website for upcoming classes and programs. I just put the CIANJ website in there also for that program for next week and other things that CIANJ is doing. I got 10:30. Tony, thank you very much for your time. I think we covered a lot in 1 hour. This video, this recording will end up on our website for anybody who wants to see, hear, or revisit it. Share it with your coworkers. And, I do appreciate Tony's time and everybody's time here this morning. Tony, any closing remarks other than the fact that everybody should make sure they get out and vote?
Get out and vote. And Phil and George and Jules, thank you. And thank everybody for taking time today to hear the conversation.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Everybody.
Everyone, spring is in the air. Go enjoy it.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, take care.